second book that really was kind of influential was written by actually a Rolling Stone magazine author who one of his assignments was to investigate how does the Catholic Church investigate miracles, for canonization of saints and things like that. So that book was interesting because it opened me up to number one, the Marian apparitions throughout the history of Christianity that I had, growing up as a Protestant, never heard a thing about. And all of my secular reading had never heard a thing about. So it was very, very fascinating. So I had one book that was talking about extracurricular, non-scriptural early Christian writings. And then at the same time was another book talking about the spiritual and supernatural life of the church. So between both of those, I just ended up, thank God, on a reading spree of all kinds of early Christian history, life of the saints, all that sort of stuff. And that was probably around the time I think I started reaching out to you all for the RCIA program. The first time I went to St. Stephen's was on a Holy Thursday. So I saw the service where they have the washing of the feet, which I had never seen in any other church I had gone to. And I knew at that point that it was the right place to be.
Wow. I find in RCIA that the answers for people coming into the church are usually complex because it's often not one thing or something else, but a preponderance of evidence, if you will, that brings people, faithful Protestants, to the Catholic Church when they've reached a point where they believe that the fullness of the truth is there.
Yeah, I would say to that point, for me personally, I felt like in life, faith and reason were two things that you would have to choose, one or the other, right? Mm-hmm. You're either going to be a person of faith and just trust in God, or you're going to be a person of reason and, you're going to look to, science and other things to answer the questions that you have. And so over time, I felt like, okay, I'm probably more of that reason camp. And I had no problem with people of faith, but I was like, maybe this is more wishful thinking than anything based in reality. And so what was so beautiful to me as I started researching Catholicism was, in the Catholic faith, faith and reason do not conflict. Right. Pope John Paul II, he there's actually an encyclical where he's talking about how faith and reason both have to be true because they're through the same God. And just seeing that approach to reality, it's just a beautiful thing.
And that occurred to me a few years ago also when I was working through these same questions, that if it's scientifically true, then it has to be of God. And if it's God, then God blessed us and created that science that we see now in the physical world. But if it's true, it's got to be of God, and we can't be afraid of science ever, even that truth might be intimidating sometimes. We cannot be afraid of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because, like I said, I feel like for me, science explained so many of the questions in life, but there's still the gaps there of things that science cannot explain. And I think the biggest example of that for me personally was the Big Bang Theory, right? That there was something outside of the created world that triggered the rapid expansion and development of this universe. And so for a Christian, it's an easy answer. It's like, okay, that source is God. But even in the world of science, the variety of theories of multiverses that you have to get to explain that, it's very speculative, I guess you could say.
Well, Scripture gives us a beautiful answer. It's simply said, but it's scientifically true. If you understand that God precedes the universe, that God was self-contained, everything was in God, and God was everything, and God in love decided for more and said, let there be.
Right.
And that let there be is the thing that explodes that singularity that is God into an ever-expanding timeline and physical reality. God's choice, because he loves and because he wants to love more, infinitely.
That's right.
The simplicity of let there be answers the most complex questions.
For sure. Yeah, completely agree.
So tell me, what about conflicts? Like, as you start to draw close to the Catholic Church, did that create conflicts? Obviously it did create conflicts in your life, coming from a Church of Christ background. Tell me a little bit about your family, your spouse maybe.
Yeah.
How was that? That's
great. So I think the easiest, actually, through this whole discussion would be my spouse, in terms of, because for a period of time I had slipped away from faith in my life, and telling her, I feel like there is a God and I want to become a Catholic. She was shocked, obviously, of where in the world did this come from. But at the same time, she was like, okay, God, I'm going to trust in you. I'm willing to be open-minded about all of that. So she was a huge support through the process, and as you know, ended up being confirmed at the same time that I was, which was, that's been great, because in the home life, it's been a great discovery and a great journey together. Just having her come into the church with me at the same time. With the rest of my family, the biggest challenge was around infant baptism, because in a lot of Protestant churches, baptism is something that doesn't happen until you reach the age of reason. But for me, it was pretty compelling from the early documents that I read that Christians would baptize their children, entire families, entire households. So those are probably the ones that were the most touchy, because you're talking about things like when we made the decision to have our daughter baptized, right? That there's some real tension there, because there's differences around, is this a valid sacrament? They wouldn't call it a sacrament, but is this actually valid, what you're doing? I would say too, the other thing that I've learned now is, it's not a good use of time to try to convince people, this is true, just by arguing, because you don't really get anywhere, and it can cause some tension. I would joke with Breland a lot of times. I said, "Yep, I just had a call with my parents, and they're Catholic now," right? Because obviously, it's not, it has to be a conversion of the heart.
Sure.
But definitely, it hasn't been as tough from my family standpoint is kind of what I'd expected. I know that really varies based on the individual experience, but no, all in all, they still believe that I'm a Christian. There's still love, there's still respect there, and all that.
When somebody becomes a Catholic, sometimes the whole family turns against them. I'm privileged to have also been witness to Breland's faith journey and to Karis's faith journey.
Right.
And how precious we hold Breland and Karis in our parish and in our church. So
Yeah.
we're grateful for that. Was there one thing that was the final, like a final straw, a final discernment for you to become a Catholic Christian as opposed to some other Protestant type of Christianity?
I've thought about that question a few different times of what is the one triggering factor. And I think for me personally, it's the doctrine of apostolic succession, right? And what that means is, so as the apostles, started the church established by Christ, before they died, they had established successors in terms of the other bishops, and there's been an unbroken line of apostolic succession from the beginning. It became pretty obvious to me that if Christ established a church with apostles who established successors, and those successors have been upholding and interpreting the Orthodox Christian tradition throughout the centuries, it's no longer a question of what style of worship do I like the most, or this church has a great children's program. It really comes down to, okay, what is true and what is false, right? And so that's where you find in the very earliest sources, Irenaeus against heresies, the church had an established priesthood with established successors. So for me, it was kind of obvious that this is the church I need to be in. The other piece is obviously the Eucharist. Once reading in the lives of the saints and other Catholic writings around the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, it becomes obvious that this is something I have to have in my life. There's no doubt about it. And it doesn't matter what your worship service has. Christ wants to commune with us in that sort of intimate way, and that's the way that he established and designed it. So I had probably from the first time I attended there, I was ready to have Holy Communion.
That was obvious really from the first time we met. And I have to point out for anybody who might be watching or listening that all of your answers point to the very reason why we have invited you to be an RCIA team member.
One note to that, Scott, that was one of the things, so like I said, apostolic succession was the main reason I felt like we needed to be a part of that church. But the other piece, I think there was one of the questions around like, was there something that you wanted to make sure of before you finally came into the faith?
Mm-hmm.
And went through kind of a crash course of the catechism. I had the print copy and then the audiobook copy as well. And I was trying to make sure there was no red flags or anything like that would really truly contradict what I'd previously thought or believed. And for me, that was such a beautiful document to go through, that the fullness of the Christian faith. And yes, it's long. I mean, you're talking about, I don't know if it's 1,500 pages. It's a pretty significant read, but you understand the fullness of Christianity. And without that, at previous churches I went to, you find a what we believe section on the website, and it's usually no more than 2 or 3 paragraphs, because after that there's 100 different ways that people don't agree on all of the basics.
This is the second time this week that somebody has brought up that very point about that little what we believe segment online when the church is offering us the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And anybody, as you know, of course, anybody who goes through that document who's a faithful Christian to begin with has to be deeply moved. It's so moving that anybody that reads it with an open heart, has to come away understanding how well the church is articulating who we believe Jesus Christ is, Lord and Savior, and how we go about practicing that faith and about believing it and about teaching it.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good.
How has being a Catholic changed your life, like on a daily basis? Does it? I know you go to work, you come home, we've got kids to take care of. How's it change your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. So it's changed my life, I think, in a lot of positive ways, in terms of, we try, as our schedule allows, to hit, daily masses as frequently as we can. But even on the days that we can't do that, my wife and I, the daily mass readings are something that we still try to go through every day. And it's fascinating to see, how the Old Testament and New Testament scriptures are put together to help tell the story of salvation history. Also, the spiritual readings that are included with the Liturgy of the Hours, which is the prayer life of the church, is something that has helped, I think, in terms of my formation and my wife's formation. So yeah, I mean, it's really our life has now kind of gotten into a routine of a lot of different Catholic practices per se, and it's truly been a positive in a lot of ways. The other piece I think I would mention is we got confirmed in December 2019, which is right before the start of the COVID pandemic, which, as you know, has been very disruptive for a lot of people throughout the world. And one of the things that the just having the Catholic teaching and having the support of the church and seeing the statements from the bishops and all of these other pieces to help guide us through a time of uncertainty has been super valuable. And then also I would say the Catholic social teaching of the church, getting a chance to read deeper into that and see how the Christian moral system, as the Catholic Church teaches and upholds, takes away a lot of those political differences and other sources of tension and division in life. So
I'm kind of fascinated with that. I'm not a political animal, so to speak, but we can't help but be caught up in the conflicts and divisions that we all face. And I'm fascinated by the social teachings of the church as we have to present them in RCIA, because I'm always struck by how some of those teachings are so utterly conservative. Our right to life teachings, right to life from womb to tomb, basically, from conception to natural death. And yet some of the social teachings sound like, even progressive teachings. And those to reconcile those ideas, some people struggle so hard with that. But I believe that when we put on Christ over the whole of that teaching, we no longer have to worry about, is this idea, conservative or liberal? Is it good, bad? If it's under Christ, it's going to work. And that's the problem, I believe, with so many of our systems, is that they are not under the authority of Christ. And so it's destined to fall apart, because when we become our own God, things go wrong.
Absolutely. And that's, I mean, I think that's one of the things that it's been a little bit liberating, in all honesty, to see and believe those social teachings. That I know that for my wife and I, we get less involved in political discussions or disputes with people because, you know, it's completely appropriate to be pro-life and concerned with the environment and concerned with the immigrant and the poor, and, you know, that to understand that and the love of Christ, all of these things matter. And so you feel less at home in any political system as you do within the teachings of the church. So that's been very transformative in a lot of our thinking.
That's beautifully said. I didn't expect to go there, but that's beautifully said. Yeah. So two more quick thoughts, if we may.
Sure.
This puts you on the spot a little bit. Your role as an RCIA team member going forward, how do you see that in the future? Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the biggest hope that I have is that, you know, that I don't get in the way of it. That I can serve Christ in that role and help other people. I do feel like, you know, a lot of the doubts and concerns that modern society has, I've felt them myself, believed them myself. I understand a lot of the different arguments against Christianity and the Catholic faith. So my real hope is that, you know, God sends people into the RCIA program where if they have those concerns, they can feel free to discuss them in a safe and non-threatening environment and find that there are answers to these questions out there. You know, you're not alone as you go through your study.
That's a perfect answer.
Okay. Yeah,
So
sounds great,
thank
Scott.
you. We're grateful to have you in our church, you and your family, and in our parish, and on the RCIA team.
Okay.
Thank you, bro.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Have a good one.
Thank
All right. See ya.